When you are ready, G, could you
I'm ready.
call
Al
the roll?
Markstrom,
Here.
Doug Erickson,
Here.
Brian Ernst,
Here.
Jeff Hallstrand,
Here.
Larry Polachek.
Okay, public comment. Do we have any public comment? Did anybody sign up? I don't think so. Anybody online? *6 to unmute. Okay, no comments from online. Communications from committee members. Do we have any? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 2, meeting minutes from October 1st. Polachek motions moves to approve, second by Barkstrom. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for approval. All those in favor of approving the minutes from October 1st, 2024, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Treasurer's report.
Okay, everybody of course has it. The interest is just starting to drop slightly for the month of October. It just went down a little bit. I have the LGIP. I got it this week and it dropped down to 4.93, so not too bad. Everything else is going good. Our sales tax is still coming in strong. Our taxes are coming in. I had sent out the issuance of tax certificates in September and then had a deadline for the 2021 taxes to be paid by October 31st before I turn the list over to the title company to start searching. You'll notice the list that we provided you, we're down to 38 parcels. One of the good things is the Lionite taxes are paid up in full now. So that
That's
was a
great.
good thing.
Wow.
I was looking for that and I couldn't find it. That's why.
Pardon?
When you say paid in full, this
Paid all-
year or all the way,
They
so it's
paid up
100%
all-
current.
Yes, they paid up all the years.
We should have a party.
Good. Now, Lynn had told me that she was going to be sending a letter with the payment explaining why they held off doing what they were doing, but there was no letter with the check because the check came from a title company. So I'm hoping she sent something maybe to you, Brian, to the board as an explanation as to what they were doing.
Quick question going forward, is that going to be considered nonprofit or don't we know?
Even though something's nonprofit, it does not make it tax exempt. It's how it's assessed. And there's, assessors have to follow the state guidelines on what is considered exempt. And just because you're a nonprofit, you are not exempt on property tax.
So we aren't real sure yet then. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is they're still going to be taxed until
Oh.
they meet some kind of assessment qualification that would make them exempt.
And the burden's on them.
Yeah, basically. So if they would turn it into forest land, if they would turn it into telecommunication towers, things like that are tax exempt. So there's only certain criteria. Being a church,
Okay.
things like that are the only things that are exempt that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
So that's kind of it for the finance report. Unless anybody has questions, then we could move on to the in-rem. Like I said, the 2021s, we're down to 38 parcels right now, which I think is very good. One of them, and I know Jean prepared the resolution or whatever for county board submitting the list. A couple of them that I have a question on. I know in the past when the assessed value of them is low, we kind of question whether or not, because in rem is so costly, do we want to take them? And if you look at the list, one of them is like Dan Kress. So I looked up this morning to see exactly where that parcel is, and Dan is deceased. I do know where one of his daughters are. But this is like behind Mike Hushall's place off of North Evans Bay Road. There's like this creek type thing that runs behind their house. That's this parcel. So basically it's a little waterway. So I don't know if we want to keep it on the list, what we want to do. It's only worth $100. The other one is the David Auman for 300. He may pay it. He's been on the list before and has paid it every year. But that's just a couple that I kind of wanted to point out to see what we want to do. And the Minocqua land investment, but they've been paying every year too as we approach redemption. And then the only other thing I wanted to kind of talk about as far as the in-rem parcels is we have quite a few that we haven't sold yet. And I was really hoping we were going to have a land sale this fall because of course we have some houses that we're paying for the electric to keep it. Winter's coming up and things are starting to, so we don't freeze up and things like that. And talking to some of the counties in my district, when we had a district meeting, quite a few of the counties, what they decided to do, at least at this point in time, is to list it at the fair market value. And I know kind of our holdup is we haven't done that template, which that I understand. And we're trying to decide how to go forward, but I'm just wondering about, possibly moving forward and using the fair market value just for this group of parcels we have right now, just to try to get rid of them so that they can be put on the tax roll in January. I know our time is probably too short now to get one in. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have Megan working on our ordinance and some other like a standard operating procedure. So we'll have to have a meeting coming up soon to just say, this is how we want to handle it. The biggest fear of doing market value would be what happens if the market value is way below the assessed value. And then somebody comes after us and says, whoa, you sold it for 20,000 when the assessed value would have been 50. You owe me 30,000 more, and we didn't follow the procedure. It's up to you as a group how you want to go forward. There's not like Lynn said, there is some cost of holding these, but not
Astronomical.
right. It's not end of the world.
But with that scenario, when we put it up for auction, isn't there a chance that we're not putting a minimum bid?
We're still breaking the law because the new law states you have to have, you can't sell it for under the A value. They didn't clearly state how to get to that value for the first time. So if we put it at market value and somebody can prove to us that we didn't do our due diligence to get the proper market value, then they could come after and say, oh, you sold it for 20. You should have at least tried to get 50 and you didn't. And it may have sold for 50. So you owe 30,000 that we wouldn't even have a chance at, even though most likely it wouldn't sell for 50. And then the second time around, it would have sold for 20, but we didn't follow the rules. So they would have a basis to go on and say, should have tried and you didn't. So that's the risk you're taking is.
Wouldn't an appraisal satisfy that?
Right, but is that the proper process that we want to go through? It's an assessment, an assessor would come out. But yeah, so
Or you got to start somewhere.
right, but that's where we need to get a standard operating procedure in line. We can go out and get all these assessed or appraised. The problem with that is some of them you may not need to, like the $100 one. You're going to spend $1,000 to have somebody come up. And I don't know if we have to get 3. Do you have to get 1? Do you have to RFP it to decide who is going to give you the best price? So you're not just picking John's appraisal service because they're a friend of yours. Are we better off using realtors? We could do an RFP for realtors and say, you guys set the market value and go sell these and split the properties up. If we have 3 realtors that all say we'll do it for 5%, 6%, pick all 3, pull them out of a hat, which one each one gets, and we're done. There's different procedures you can.
But this is all something we have to set up in an ordinance that we put together?
Correct. Yep. And we were waiting for WCA. They've recently released the ordinance. None of us are happy with the level
They
of
didn't really,
detail.
yeah, they didn't give details. So the counties are all struggling right now
Right.
to try to figure out. And like I said, at my district meeting, the counties in our district, most of them this year to meet the deadline for the number of days the parcels are in our hands, because there's a time limit that we have to sell them. They're just going to go with the fair market until they fine tune their
And we're
ordinance.
lucky right now because the ones we took prior don't fall under the timeline because we did it before the ruling. Eventually, we'll have to get rid of them, but we have to follow the new rules besides the timeline. The only thing we're grandfathered out of is the timeline. If we take this next set of properties, that's when the first timeline starts, which I think the first time we do this year, it's 240 days.
I thought it was 180.
That's for the next time. So the first time, because of all this extra ordinance and everything, there
They
was an
extended it.
extension. So I think this first group, when we take, will be 240 days. The second set will be 180 going forward. So that's why we're working on taking the WCA's version and adding in what we want to do. Some of the suggestions from other counties is make a step where you inform all the surrounding property owners that they have the right, like this one that Lynn's talking about, say it owes $100. They, as the neighbor, anybody can pay taxes, right? So you could come in and say, here's $100, I want to put it on this property. So I can't remember what county I was talking to. There's a couple of them, but what they do is they send a letter to all the neighbors saying, this property that butts up against yours is in tax foreclosure process. If you'd like to come pay it and then work with your neighbor on a deal, go ahead. So like this one, the neighbor could come and pay it, go to the sister or the next of kin and say, I'll give you $500. I'll do all the paperwork and transfer. Because a lot of times, like on a property this size, it's more costly to go through the title process and the sale process than the property's worth. So the slivers, right? Those little slivers. So this would be a perfect example where the neighbor would say, I'll pay for the title, I'll pay for the legal work. You good? And they go, yep, I don't want the tax burden in the future. So there's an additional process we can consider.
Mr. Holzman.
So I'm going to engage Doug on this because he's more familiar, but every village, city, and township is required to have an assessor on staff hired. Could we not, at the point of we're repossessing, I'm just going to grab one off the list here. You said this, Daniel Kress. City of Phillips, would you have your appraiser go out? Doug, can you call your appraiser and say, I'd like you to give me an estimate of fair market value on that property? And under the contract where you pay your assessor, is that not covered?
There's two different people we're talking about. So the appraisal and the assessment is two different things. Assessments is for the taxes, right?
Yeah.
And the appraiser is if I sell my property. So they're two different skill sets.
The assessor does put fair market value on it.
Well, the
Based on
state
the-
puts fair market. They put an assessed value in, like right now, the ratios, the aggregate ratios just came out last week. And most of the towns are only at like 60-something% assessed. So right now, the fair market values are high compared to the assessment because they're not assessed at 100%.
Right, and that causes a different problem because if you're not within 10% of the fair market
You go
value
through a
based-
reval.
you go through a reval. So the state, like she said, sets the market. The assessors are the ones that should have been keeping up with the changes. And if you get with it out of whack by 10%, you have to do a
Within a
reval.
5-year process. So like next year, Elk is going through a reval. Harmony just went through one. And I think looking at the
Everybody will be
ratios
going-
right now, we're going to look at a lot of revals coming up.
So again, two different things. So we need to decide, like, that's where the standard operating, do we do an RFP? Do we, I some of us as counties that talking, I do really like if it's an option saying, we took these 5 properties, we did an RFP for realtors. You realtors are the expert. You give us what you're going to charge us. We pick the best value because then everybody can still sell it. It's just who's going to do all the marketing, who's going to get it out there. If we get 3 of them that are all on the same level, we draw names, each one gets a different one. If there's 6 of them, they each get 2. They can still cross sell. It's just who gets the profit. And that profit should be covered by the sale because that's part of what you can take out of it. Any proceeds from the sale based on all of our costs, all the realtor costs, all the holding costs, transfer costs, we get back. The difference gets held into a fund that then eventually goes to the state if it's not claimed, and we're out of it. So again, we got to come up with a standard operation, which isn't easy because no one knows what it
We don't know
legally
what
needs to be.
lawsuits can come up.
Right,
on
and we're
anything
already,
besides.
there may be a stay on selling coming up because we received a letter. I can't remember what, it's on Gene's desk. It came to me asking for all information on properties sold since 2004 or 14.
I don't even.
There was a number in my head, I can't remember. And
I
it's
have
a
it, I
law
have it.
firm.
Want to go retroactive.
Yeah, there's a
and try-
law firm out of Milwaukee that's asking all counties to tell us what was sold and give us, they didn't ask for profit, just whose properties. What I think is going to happen is they'll send out a letter to all those property owners based on the past thing saying, do you want to commit to a class action suit? If they get enough people, then we'll see what it looks like. The only nice part about that is on a class action suit, it's much different than each individual coming and saying, my property was this, you sold it for 5,000 or you sold it for 10,000 and owed 5, we'd owe that individual. What they'll do is through an insurance process, but all the counties will look at it, the insurance will go, on average, you sold it for $6,000 more than the property. That's what we want for every property, and we'll distribute it to the class action rather than trying to do every individual property for every county. It'll be a
Mr. Bergstrom.
So the standard operating procedure that we're working on, is that going to be a statewide effort so all the counties are the same, or is it going to be a
Nope.
patchwork?
Well, that was kind of the goal with the WCA doing this template. They do want us all to treat things the same, but
They're giving
like
you
Nick
the
said, it's
foundation.
so-
Yep.
they just gave
They
a foundation.
they give you the
so-
foundation, so that's where the foundation starts. Above and beyond that is the patch quilt of how you want to handle it. So there's minimum handling processes, but then there's the detail and how you and who you want to do those processes. So do you want to do that extra step of contacting the neighbors? Because those get rid of a lot of those little ones and save you a lot of time and effort.
So
And-
perhaps everything is going to be starting with the base template
yep,
and each county is going to individually tweak it.
correct. Yep.
meet their needs and whatnot. And also quite a few of the counties now too allow people to redeem up to the court
That- yeah.
date,
So
which we haven't done in the past.
So that's the next, those are the standard issues we need to discuss. In the past, like Lynn said, is we said, once the court hit, you're done. No coming, no family member, no nothing. That we've given you plenty of time and whatever. A lot of counties now have switched through this new process to say, okay, we're still doing court's this date, but we're not doing the sale for another X days. If a family member then learns about it and comes and says, here you go, it's really cheaper
Yes.
and less work for us to accept that payment because then we don't have to sell it. We don't have to hold the money. We don't have to try to distribute it to a next of kin. They can come and pay up 100% of what's due. They can then work with their family to transfer it into their name, do whatever. It might help their family out, whatever it might be. So that's one recommendation I probably would in our process is allow anybody. It doesn't give them ownership. That's the difference. If my parents were to be failing to pay their taxes and I walked up and paid it, that we have nothing to do with ownership of the property. That I would still have to go through the process of transferring that
Going
property
through probate if you have
Correct.
to. or
Whatever the-
yeah.
where the stage of life.
But you're
people are.
talking about retroacting because once Lynn or the county says, we have now taken your property, spent all the lawyer fees, done all that, it still goes to court one more time after that is what you're saying, or?
No,
Well,
Because isn't it our property at that point? If somebody walked in and paid the taxes.
from
thanks,
court.
It's
yeah,
ours.
they can do it from what I've been told from other counties, the court date itself, up until the judge puts down the gavel, they could come in with the money and pay up all the tax, all the back years, not just that particular year.
And
all
fees,
the
and
fees
fees,
and
yes.
everything. And it would be removed off the list before the judge did
Off,
the
off
judgment.
this list. But if these homes that you said we've already
That
taken,
we've already.
somebody
taken.
can't come in and pay
No.
them back taxes and say,
No.
well, I want it now.
We could allow that. That's something you can consider so that we don't have to go through the sale process and the distribution of funds. It gets back on the tax roll and you're done with it.
And
So that's
also,
gonna be-
all the liens and mortgages are reinstated if that would happen.
Correct.
Because
So they don't get,
we
it's
don't
not a
want
bankruptcy
people
process.
to try
Yeah.
to use that process to wipe out liens and judgments and then come and get it free and clear. So the law is kind of clear on that. If the family would get it back at that point, all the liens and judgments are reinstated.
So we're looking at a new or
whole
additional SOP and an ordinance that
Yeah.
basically states that SOP, so that
Right, so
pretty
I have
big
Megan,
document.
yep, so I have Megan working on that. I've given her a couple examples that Lynn has shared with me or I've had. It hasn't been on the top of our to-do list. We got to get moving on that, but it'll have to come to this committee to give their blessing and then through the whole ordinance process. So that's public hearing, this isn't
A
gonna
lot
be
of
quick.
steps. Yeah.
well, but we still have a timeline to meet once we start, if we approve this
If-
resolution today.
Yeah, if we go to court, from when the gavel goes down, we have 240 days to get it done.
Okay,
So that's just kind of an update, kind of where we're
Yeah.
at on that stuff.
anything else? Should we move on to the resolution?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Resolution, authorize the issuance of tax deed for 2021. I'm just going to read it. Be it further resolved that the executive committee will have final authority in deciding if said tax deed properties are processed as tax deed pursuant to 75.14 Wisconsin statutes or processed as in rem pursuant to 75.521 Wisconsin statutes. Looking for motion to approve. Motion by Polachek, second by Barkstrom. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of this resolution? Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on. Katkins contract update, item number 5. Nick?
Yep. So we, Mr. Hahn, Robert Hahn, Deputy Hahn, and I met with Katkins a couple weeks ago. We came to several agreements on processes and the amount and who's responsible for what. I gave that all that information to Megan, our corp counsel, and she rewrote it as a contract rather than what we've had in the past is just a nice letter to each other that kind of looked like a contract. So now I am meeting with them next Wednesday to finalize all the verbiage in that contract, but we do have what I would call a tentative agreement. So they originally asked for 200,000 a year. We agreed to change a couple of the processes and go to 120 for the next 5 years with a 4% increase each year. So during that 5-year process, they can't request additional funding. We do have the ability, like if a process is not going well or processing, we can open that up and discuss that. But the financial side of it is, this is what it is. We're in agreement for a minimum of 5 years. After the 5 years, it just renews with no need to discuss unless both parties have an issue with it. I think in the end, we all were unhappy, but happy with where it ended up being. So to me, that says we worked together on it. But it'll be a good partnership to continue. We need each other to make it successful. So it went well.
Any further discussion?
The only fiscal side of it, so we, in our 2025 levy, we put $100,000 anticipating this discussion. So what we will be doing is a resolution to recommend using ARPA funding to make up the difference this year. And the reason we are recommending that is we have to allocate or have a contract for all of our ARPA funding by the end of this year. in order to be in compliance and not have to turn back some of our funding. So it just works out well that this year we'll use 20,000 of that ARPA funding, and then next year in our levy we'll start to creep up what we put towards that funding using levy and use less ARPA. So Carrie and I are working out the final number of what we would recommend over the next 25, 26 to use for ARPA funding in order to draw down our ARPA funding. It may be more than the budgeted levy, like, so even though we only need 20, we may recommend more so we can draw it down and put it into the general fund to use it in the future. Accounting is what it'll look like, but we'll clarify that when we get to that point. So it's funded, it's not above, it's above what we levied for, but we knew that going into it, that we weren't going to try to adjust the levy based on what the contract was.
And that discussion will take place probably at the next meeting because we have to allocate before the end of the year.
Correct. So December, be ready to talk ARPA and resolutions.
Question on that. When you say 4% each year, so next year is gonna be 125,000?
124.8 or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Yep.
falling, so we're gonna be in the 5-year period, we're gonna be at almost 150,000.
Yeah.
So does the county board have to approve that by the end of the year or just this committee?
Just the committee. We just want to get that.
Okay.
We'll put it online as long as the committee is for the ARPA funding,
Yes.
not that. Yeah. I do think after the 5-year period, we'll be addressing that number, that 4%, because it does escalate quite quickly over the long period. It's also, if we would have looked at when we started 5 years ago at the 40 some thousand, if we would have done 4%, it doesn't go up as fast because it's
Right.
not as, but yeah. And some of the things we talked about at that meeting is we really did pressure and say, why are we doing cats? What's the purpose of, how are we assisting? Why is that the best thing for the community? And they had a lot of good discussion, or we had a lot of good discussion about that. We're not far off from the surrounding counties. I mean, we're not 5 times as much. I do find it interesting. I brought this up at my admin meeting, and there's several large counties that are going through the same process right now, and they had very low cost, and they don't know what they're doing or how they're going to cover the cost that's needed to move forward with this, the cost of animals across the state. The one that we wanted to be more like was Ashland and Bayfield, because they had what we used to have 5 years ago, 7 years, when we had Mr. Jansen was a contracted service and it was very reasonable. Ashland County has been able to maintain that up until this year, and their individual just gave notice that they're no longer going to be doing that. So they're going through the process we just went through, and they are discovering it's not as cheap as it used to be. So
Well, one other question on this money. So like just remembering the court case with the cats, and we had to pay daily besides this fee.
yep.
So if a dog goes up there, we are paying daily on
No.
that dog.
No, not for so if we pick up any stray hold, it's 4 days, that's covered. We don't pay extra. Only time we pay extra is if the court system, it's a criminal case and we need it as evidence. So once the 4 days happens, it's not even that there's not a charge, Catkins does. So Nick has a dog, it gets picked up on the road, it's considered a stray, it goes up to Catkins. I find out it's at Catkins. I go up there. It's been there 3 days. I owe Catkins a holding fee. They choose whether or not to charge it or waive it based on a couple criteria they have. 99% of the time it's charged, right? It's a cost to them, but we don't pay. As long as it's not a criminal thing, we pay no extra. And then on those criminal ones, we put it on the judgment. So like they went to court for the cat thing for the criminal case a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I don't remember when it went, but they were found, whatever. There was an initial appearance that they ended up receiving a bond. So they got booked in, they were bonded out on this criminal charge. Some of their things where they no longer can have cats, and then they had a bond. if the charge goes through the court system, we'll be putting the fees that, or the costs that we had onto that judgment. So they would have not only a judgment for the criminal, whatever the state ticket is, the allowable amount, they would have a judgment of another $44,000 or whatever the amount was. So hopefully we recover that. Not likely.
Anything else regarding Ketkins? Okay, we'll move on to County Administrator Financial Report.
All right. So in front of you, you should have a packet with the logo on it. I'm not sharing because I'm not in the meeting. So sorry if you're on your computer online, you won't see it. We're at 83% through the year. There are some departments that are a little higher than that. Tax lister, we had the retirement, some payouts. That's where that one comes from. What we've had this year, probably the major things that will affect the end of year number are we have a maintenance issue in the sheriff's building with some duct work that blew out. So it's a replacement of a duct that goes straight from the air handler north, so up. That has we're calling it an emergency repair, but it's obviously we didn't have to have them come in that moment and fix it, but it's a repair that needs to be done in order for the system to function properly. With that, we're also making a chute that comes off of the main drig that would be able to, any one of us would be trained to be able to go in there and change the air handler to redirect all air into our IT room. So that'll be like, we had an air conditioner go down in the IT room, and within about 30 minutes, it got up to about 120 degrees, which then everything starts shutting down. So there would be a couple of us that would be trained. We get an email saying your air conditioner went out or things are getting hot. We would go over there and we would be able to switch it over to the emergency air conditioning. So we're putting that in as we fix that.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on
Mr.
that.
Holzman, I'm sorry.
Faulty air ducts. Didn't we move a bunch of ARPA money over to fix the faulty air ducts in the sheriff's department
did
a year
the-
ago?
A couple of years ago, we did $30,000 in air duct work. This is a main drig that goes up and down. So we did. the
Wasn't
floors.
identified as bad at that time, or?
No, we did the lower level and the jail level, the east and west, the floor ventilation, or it'd be in the ceiling, but the horizontal, not the vertical. So now we're doing the vertical. So that's where that's coming from. It blew out. It's that duct board instead of stainless. On the plans it shows the galvanized, whatever, the metal. It shows metal on all the blueprints. And when we had the blowout, so we didn't even look at it when we were doing the other stuff, because on the blueprints it said metal and it was not metal. So whoever built it several years ago did not follow the blueprints.
This isn't part of the new addition.
No, this is in the
It's
old building.
So
Yeah.
it could have been 50, 60 years ago.
Oh yeah, it's old. You poke your finger through it. That's
Yeah, that's why I was confused. Was this all part of the new building? that
no.
We haven't even paid off yet.
No. This is the old portion. So that's one area we'll see an overage. As many of you know, we had a brush fire which turned into a body down on Highway 13. So we've had, since Sunday afternoon, we've had most of our staff in working overtime to see what's going on there. That's slowing down a little bit now. They're going back to their normal rotation, but we do have several additional individuals on. There's been additional costs, just stuff you need during a situation like this. So you'll see that overage this month at the sheriff's department. And then we've also had some additional costs up in the clerk of courts for legal fees. So I think what it is if you don't get a public defender in a timely fashion, the judge can order a local court appointed lawyer. So they can go and force you to pay for their lawyer to get it moving because they can't get a public defender in a timely fashion.
As
We've
far
been
as
lucky.
that fire/body recovery,
Mhm.
is there any chance, is there any state or federal money available to reimburse us?
No, it just happens in your county and
Okay.
there's a cost. We do have a several surrounding counties helping, and that's aid, mutual aid. So we've had several, there are a lot of help that gets covered by those counties also.
Okay.
Yeah.
They don't bill us back for that. That's
So, like,
considered
we-
mutual
yeah,
aid.
if you have investigators from Taylor, Russ, Sawyer, Onai, surrounding counties, they're just here to assist because it's considered a major incident. Next page is Health and Human Services. The big thing we've been talking about there is how behavioral health has become more expensive than our budget, but then children and youth has been below the budget because we're allocating to the proper area. We're seeing more funding in the future from the state, so we did adjust our budget for next year to account for how we're accounting for this, but we also see some additional funding hopefully coming in the future years. We've had, I think at Health and Human Services, they brought up 2 individuals that may be going to a high long-term placement, which will be, I want to say it's like 20 grand a month for that cost. So I don't think we've had to yet, but I know we're close on that. Other areas, so animal control, which part of that, so animal control, not only is that our contract, but when we do dog tags, that gets put into there to go offset some of the humane officer and the contract. Veteran services doing well, library fund, that's a one time a year. Airport, we'll talk about a resolution later, and then some of the things we would recommend going forward with that. Highway, it's been good fall. We haven't had those winter needs to go out on the weekend yet. Any questions about the budget or the cost so far?
How's our health insurance coming in?
Not as good as we hope, but not an extreme yet. So there's,
The balance that we ended last year to where we're at right now.
yeah, so we're not overspending. So last year we ended with a couple thousand below our fund balance, which we knew because we had some real high cost placements, or high cost claims, not placements, claims right at the end of the year. Which the nice thing is we pay those, we go the negative, our stop loss goes into place, and then we actually receive money back. So we're getting checks, like the other day we got a check for $50,000 because somebody went over the $100,000 mark. So that gets put in this fund. We did raise our insurance to the employee and to the county going into next year. So we'll start to make up some of that, or at least maintain. We're doing better than most. So a lot of surrounding municipalities and counties saw 40% increase, 30% increase. We did I think we're 8 to 9% is what we ended up doing. So we did well there. This year we had 3, maybe 4 individuals hit our stop loss so far, which is $100,000. So some of those costs, like we have one individual that I think their monthly medicine is like $26,000. So we actually pay that out of pocket or out of fund. And then after about 3 months, we get reimbursed. So there's always that big dip for the first 2-3 months of those type of things. Trying to think what else with health insurance. Oh, our stop loss for next year. Our contract went up quite a bit because we had so many hit our stop loss. Normally when you hit stop loss, it's like we have $100,000 or $105,000 stop loss. Normally the average person that goes over it hits like 150, 160, maybe 200. Last year we had somebody that hit the stop loss that was like $1.3 million. So your renewal takes that into account, and it for the next couple of years we'll have a higher stop loss insurance cost.
Bergstrom.
On the whole budget here, I don't see any grand totals for all the departments combined, but it would appear to me that we're gonna,
Page. That's your
Right
grand
here.
totals. Yep.
okay, but it looks like we're gonna have a deficit.
No,
No. Well, yeah, you still have a month left, but yes, right now you're at 86% collected. So 27. Yes, our revenues right now are lower than your expenditures. at the moment.
and a lot of that, yeah, so the
Oh,
deficit.
is there an anticipated projection of if there's gonna be a deficit, what it's gonna be?
Not yet, because a lot of that depends on end of year, and Carrie can talk about this, but go ahead.
The other thing is that there won't be a deficit at the end of the year because what's not showing up in there is the debt that we're going to incur. So we spent our highway money and then
Yeah.
we're going to be taking the debt to replenish that. So that at the end of the year, that revenue will be higher.
That's what I was wondering,
Right, so we
is the
pay
deficit
cash.
gonna come out of cash?
No, there won't be a
There
deficit.
won't
So
be a
right
deficit.
now, we've created a negative, so look at it as like instead of getting paid as an individual, like your payroll, you get paid every 2 weeks. If we said we only pay you twice a year, you get a real big check, you spend all your money, and then you get a big check to replenish that. That's what we do with highway. We say we have the cash, so I don't want to pay the bank's interest, or you guys say we don't want to pay the bank's interest. So we're going to use our cash funds to go down, 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 down. And then in December, we go into the bank and say, we spent $3 million. I need $3 million so that I can collect $3 million in taxes. And so we replenish that to zero and then make the payment next year. So that's why it's hard to actually follow like a day to day. The other things you're going to see is stumpage. We talk about this all the time. This year is very, very low compared to prior years. So we're normally at $1.2 million this year, at this point, or getting close to the $1.2 million. I don't know. We'll look in a second. If we're only at $500,000, that means we're $600,000 below what we expected. So we will.
684.
So we're 684 below, or that's what we spent. So we're 500,000 below what we expected. However, last year we were $500,000 above. So if you take the 2-year total, we're broke even. So that's why we don't play the here. We're going to be below this yet because there's so many factors in there. Our cash, you can see we're much, much lower than prior years, but we also spent much, much more on asphalt and the big thing. So we made a check for $3 million in September. And so you spend quite a bit.
Just to be clear, we knew we were going to spend that though.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. $3 million is what we do. This is where then in December, we go to the bank and say, we spent $3 million. I need to be able to collect that in taxes. Give me a check for $3 million. So at the end of the year, we'll see a minimum of $3 million bump plus any taxes that people start paying early. Our cash balance will go up. So it's a down, and this year it's an extreme down because of that $3 million. It's the largest expense we've had on construction. Sales tax, if you look at, we did August, it was 147,000, which is $24,000 more than last year in August. We are $4,246 less than last year in the same month. So it's been pretty plateaued, and we had talked about that, where that's what we figured would kind of start to happen, was the plateau. Price County stumpage, as Jeff mentioned, we've collected 684,000. Last year at this time, we collected 1.2 million. We do budget 1.27 million. So we do know, we believe that we will be below our expected collection of, or budgeted amount for this year. Last year, we were over by 439,000. So again, you start to spread that out. We've hit a average budget.
Quick question, just refresh my memory. This year's or upcoming budget, did we account for low timber sales?
I think we plateaued it. We kept it
I
the
think we
same.
kept it the same.
Yeah. So we didn't, you don't want to start going down because then you got to take from somewhere else when, if you look at the history. So in 2019, we
Yeah, no,
budgeted.
I understand
yeah.
what you're saying, but
So we'll be,
they're
we'll
gonna make
be,
us feel good because using an average, but
well,
I'm
no,
not sure stumpage is ever going to come back anytime soon.
but that's what will start to slowly go down. So we've over collected based on our budget, almost almost $2 million in the last 5 years.
Right.
So that's why our fund balance is so high. So we want to start drawing that down because we don't want to overtax, right? We want to start drawing that towards that 1.2. And once we start to see that $2 million of overage start to get closer to like the $500,000, we'll slowly bring it back down. So next year we plateau. The year after, if we do believe that it's going to continue to stay stagnant or go down, that's when we have to start finding money elsewhere. So we'd go back down to 1.2 and we'd say, okay, I need $70,000 from highway, wherever it might be. And then the following year, if we still think it's coming down, okay, we used a little bit more of that $2 million surplus. We go down to 1.1. And now where do you get the 100,000? Is it high cost placements? Is it wages? Is it whatever it is? Then you go the next year. And so you want to meet 6 years or 5 years out. You don't want to try to pick it up in 1 year because can't predict the future of logging, but we can work towards what it's going to be.
So back to Mr. Barkstrom's question earlier about our cash balance. When you're saying the last 5 years we've been over,
Mhm.
that's contributing to the cash balance. So I would anticipate the cash balance to go down,
Yep, slowly go down. Yep.
slowly go down to where it starts to look funny.
No, it starts to look historical. So when I started here, we averaged between $4 and $6 million at the end of the year. Over the last several years, if you look at our cash balance at the end of the year, it's been closer to 10 to there's 10, there's 9, 8. So historically, we've been in that $6-7 million mark. That's where we've decided 10 years ago that that's where you want to keep it. It'll be a little bit more now because you want to keep 3 months of your general expenses or 20% of your total. So we got to we're working back towards that. We don't want to go below that, but again, you want to meet the two lines together out here, not try to adjust every year.
But being self-insured plays into that just a smidgen as
Yep.
well.
So our total end of year cash shouldn't be 6 million. It should be 6.5 million. You want $500,000 would be part of that. So you take into account all those little things and you pick a number you want to 20% is what we historically have done. And we had extra cash because of ARPA. We had extra cash because we've done well with stumpage. We had extra cash from that, not PILT, but that 400,000 from tribal whatever money. So there's lots of little things that add up. And once you break those down, we're not actually way over where we historically have been with cash. We just have different pools of cash that I wouldn't say are earmarked, but they're starting to be, or they are segregated.
If we ever get a Blue Source check, that will go into the cash.
Right. So then you'd want to, instead of 6.5 million, you'd want to be at 7.5 because we've already established that we want $1 million
Buffer.
fund. Stumpage, high cost placements, we talked about that, but children and youth, we're starting to see a tick up because I said we have 2 individuals that may be a high cost, but if you compare high cost placements, children and youth and AODA, you can see where we're seeing those costs. That's part of the problem is there's not a lot of destinations available or accepting of certain levels of need. So I don't know which area it would go. Parks, that's a new one that we threw on here. You can see where we're back to pre-2021 levels. Each park has its own report for you guys to see. And then I don't have the one with health insurance, but it is in your print off.
Yeah, they have a separate sheet.
And we talked about that one where we're maintaining last year's end of year. So we know we have a couple checks coming in for high costs.
I got a quick question on parks. Maybe it's for the forestry committee, but miscellaneous park costs last year was only $78. This year is $7,300. Is that for a piece of equipment or is that? Okay.
That's used for all of them.
Yep.
And we allocate, I think, 120 or 125,000 for all the parks each year, and then they can figure out what's the best need. So a lawnmower fits in it. We don't have to come back and we need a piece of equipment for 7,000.
Well, and the tractor was just in for repair too, so.
Yeah, repairs every year get us highway. Oh, that's one that Roger did call me on. They'll have some higher maintenance costs. Again, you might not see it because if we have a late start to winter, it covers itself. But we had 3 trucks that had major repairs last week. One, he told me these technical terms, but they had to replace an engine because something flew through an engine, a rod, or I don't know. I don't know anything about engines. We had a transmission go out, so they had to replace the transmission, and then the rear axle of one of them went out, so they had to replace that. So 3 vehicles, and it was like 2 days that had what they consider major repairs.
Pretty happen now.
Yeah, better now and get ready for winter than in the middle of winter.
What are these trucks that are fairly old?
I didn't even ask.
Okay.
He just called just so you know. Which is good. It keeps us in the loop. Yeah. Yeah. So Carrie brought it up, and this is technical stuff for you guys. So when it's major repairs, if it hits a certain threshold of percentage of the total cost of the vehicle, the state allows you to redepreciate that. So say that truck was already depreciated at 8 years and 9 is the total. If we put $30,000 or $40,000 into it, you can actually redepreciate that, which helps our equipment fund because then we're paying ourselves back for that for future equipment. I can't remember, it's 15%. There's a percent threshold of the piece of equipment.
Anything else regarding financial report? Okay, we'll move on to 6B, budget.
Yeah, this one just quick. Nothing has changed in the 2025 budget based on what you or the full county board sent to the public hearing. So we just put it on here just in case there's something you want to discuss or us to prepare for next Tuesday. The process that we'll go through is, because it's at the public hearing portion, is if there's public hearing, that is things you can consider. You can consider anything in the budget changing, but you have the public hearing, have individuals speak towards it. At that point, they close the public hearing. We can discuss, or you can move on with the budget as presented and approve it. In the past, we have had Carrie or myself have done a public comment because we've missed something. So that would be the process, is if we saw something that had to change in the budget, we would then speak during public comment saying, hey, we recommend this, so that you guys can discuss it. It just is the cleanest way to publicly make a change based on what was presented and forwarded to the public hearing. There's none that we plan on making.
Okay. Any questions on the budget? Okay, move on. Next item 7, resolution. Approve airport project to be funded with money transferred from the Capital Improvement Fund. Now therefore it be resolved that the Price County Board of Supervisors approves the airport T-hanger project as presented with the estimate cost of $1.6 million with funds of up to $998,000 to be temporarily committed from the Capital Improvement Fund with anticipated reimbursement of 90% from the FAA. And be it further resolved that the estimated maximum amount the county would be invoiced for the project is $415,000, with $300,000 of that amount expected to be reimbursed with AIP entitlement grants in future years. Look for a motion to approve this resolution. Polachek makes the motion, Barkstrom second. Discussion. Any questions regarding the wording or the numbers? Looks like everybody's reading it right now a little bit, so give you a minute or two.
So there's no guaranteed on this 90, 10, 90%, 10%. I mean, it just says estimated. And estimated.
Yeah, the reason it's estimated is because we don't know the total cost of the project. So Carl, the person we contracted to do that, he gives you that conservative, high-end guess. That's what we put in it. Hopefully it comes in at 1.3 million total with all the different projects. And then it would be the 90-10 of that. So we
That's
can't,
for-
that's why we
The
can't. put, like-
90-10 is for sure. It's
Yeah.
just that,
Sure.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
can't put like, we're gonna get 540,000, because I can't guarantee we're gonna get 540 at, it may be less, as in the whole project costs less for the 90-10.
Are these numbers including the asphalt up to the new hangar?
This is everything to do with the hangar, yes. That's why, because the hangar was actually only $1 million or 900.
1.2, I thought.
Yeah, but like the
last
total with
meeting.
all the engineering, all the everything is 1.6. It's not even 90-10 by the time you're done, because there's the 150, the entitlement funds that pay for part of it. So it got real confusing. The numbers are correct.
Can-
But this is complete, period.
Correct. That's
yes, this
Ready to rent.
complete
no
project.
no more coming to ask for more for the T hangar project.
Doug, we can remove that anticipated.
Yeah, I just was
I
wondering that
understand
word
what you're
there.
looking
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
It's in there that anticipated is gonna be 90-10. If we know that for sure, that can be
Yeah.
removed.
Yeah, the 90-10 is for sure.
That is for sure.
The amount is the
Yeah,
anticipated amount
okay, I'll
up to
reprint that.
up to the 90-10.
Do we need to amend this resolution? then?
No, because you're still approving it.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I'm waiting. I do.
Hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor, signify
Aye.
by saying aye.
I,
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I'll get a new original you signed, Larry.
Okay,
Gotcha.
moving along. Item 8, resolution. Before we go into this, Mr. Kolpish is here. Now would be the time to give us a little bit of history here, and he also has a guest speaker.
Haven't done this in a long time.
Speak up, please.
Can you hear me now? Thanks, Jeff. All right. We've had a fair amount of discussion about SEP this past year and the issues we've been dealing with there. And at our last board meeting, I proposed a suggestion to the board about the counties putting a resolution together, exactly what's in this resolution here. And I got favorable response, but somebody's got to start it. Somebody's got to get the ball rolling. And so I took it upon myself to get this going here at Price County. So we're taking a little bit of a leadership role. But this has to do with part of the problem. And a big part of the problem is the bulk of our revenues, our budget money, comes out of this Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is a federal grant. And this has been in place since the 1960s. And as you can see in the resolution, over the last several years, our funding has dropped from about 1,460,000 down to anticipated for this next year, 1,030,000. That's a significant cut. We're still providing the same services. As you're aware, the inflation rate over the last 4 years, depending who you talk to, is up in the 20% range. So costs are going up. The demand is still there for the services, and the federal government's reducing our funding. So basically what we're asking for here is support of Price County to go to the federal government, that's our senators and our congressmen, and say, hey, we need to get this money reinstated, and we need to have some kind of an inflation factor in there so that as we go forward, we don't keep running into this problem. This is part of the reason we're in the hole that we are in, because our organization, the SEP organization, did not take corrective actions quicker and respond to the fact that our revenue stream had declined. So we used up cash reserves to the point where we don't have cash reserves. And Skylar will talk to you a little bit about what has happened since August, since we made the change in management. And to tell you, I think it's very positive. So I'd like you to hear it so you know that stuff is happening to address the situation. But we get this funding back, we can start reinstating some of the actions we had to take and provide the services that we need to provide. So with that, I'll turn it over to Skylar.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Skylar Durrell Ader. I am the Executive Director for Northwest Wisconsin SEP. I took over the role August 1st when the past Executive Director, Jeff Muse, separated from the organization. I've been with SEP for about 10 years in various roles. I started with business services, and then I was human resources director, and then now executive director. I live in Park Falls, so I've been in this area my whole life. I knew when I graduated, I knew that I wanted to be back in this area. So this area means a lot to me, being able to work here and then help citizens in this area too. So I gave you a few handouts that you can look through. I'm not going to read everything to you, of course. So a lot of things have happened since August 1st. When Jeff was here talking to you, things were looking pretty dim, pretty dark. We had a lot of work to do. We had a lot of things to get through. Along with our finance director, managers, other staff, we've been doing some financial cleanup. A lot of things should have been addressed over the last 5 years. They just really weren't. We've been establishing some different accounting procedures, different reporting, and just some organizational realignment, working on reestablishing and growing partnerships throughout our 10-county region dedicated to this collaborative teamwork. We're all coming together. We're all working together. Due to significant cuts in the WIOA funding, which Mr. Kobish had talked about, we have had to lay off 3 people effective October 1st. We've also not hired back staff over the past couple of years if they've left our organization. We've closed our physical Spooner location. However, services are being offered at other community sites throughout Washburn County. While we get back on track with our spending freezes, we've reduced staffing hours. It'll be reevaluated over the next several weeks as we're increasing our caseloads. However, I'm happy he has resigned and our staff morale is good, all things considered. Everybody's stepping up, asking what they can do to help things. We recently received final budget approval on a line item, and I'm happy to say that we are looking at a nearly balanced budget after an original deficit. It does include almost 50% less staff than 5 years ago, but we intend to do all that we can. We're scaled back on our operations at the current time, but planning to use the next few months to reorganize plans, seek new opportunities, and put our best foot forward in the future. We've been around since 1968, and I hope that we can be around for a long time more into the future. And we're hoping that with this resolution, we hope that it reaches the right people, and we're hoping that through the federal government, we can reestablish some WIOA funds for our WDA, Workforce Development Area. It will allow us to provide more on-the-job training contracts, which provides reimbursements to employers to compensate costs, training programs for students, soft skills training for students, work experiences, youth programming, general workforce and economic support. I also have a chart on the bottom of that shows that the Park Falls Job Center is actually getting the most contacts of any of our job centers throughout the region, which I think is something to really be proud of. It shows the need in our community for that. This other report here shows our engagements, the clients that we're seeing, business contacts, what people are needing. If you turn to the next page, shows some things that we're doing, resume workshops in the schools. Geldwin, impacted this area quite a bit too. We were doing rapid response events, workshops, transition centers, officially enrolling people, different open houses. There's some success stories to read through there. And then I know that sometimes it comes up that, if unemployment's so low, what are people doing in the job center? So there's a list of services that we're doing as well. So just kind of wanted to share what we're doing, even though funding has been kind of bleak and we're doing some cleanup, but we're moving forward. We're looking at things positively, really want to put our best foot forward. So I'm looking forward to being in contact with you all too about what we're doing for our region and just going ahead and going from there. So thank you for your time and consideration. If anybody has any questions, I'm certainly
I would.
to take-
So
yeah.
in summary, what you said is that you're financially sound now. Because
we're getting there. I don't know if I would say sound,
you
but
made
we're making
substantial
progress.
reductions in staff and
Yes.
and expenses.
Yes, and we just took our whole budget and kind of sliced through it.
Still providing the services.
We're still providing services, reducing some of them to some degree, but we're also looking at efficiency. What can we do to still provide services while backing off of some?
So are
but
you
still being
expecting more or less money from, is it the federal government or state?
So it comes in federally, but then the state pushes it to us. We do have,
Action, are you going to expect less?
we're
Again?
expecting less. We're hoping for more, but expecting less. That's been the trend. There are other grant programs that we can write for, but we, have to look for being on sound financial ground before we can do that, which is what we're focusing on now.
Okay, thank you.
So in short summary, what you're asking us with this resolution is just to affirm our support for this service.
Correct. Yes.
It's not going to cost the county any money.
No.
Would make that motion forward onto the full board.
Motion by Hallstrand, second by
second.
Thank you.
Mr. Erickson. I've got a couple questions yet, though, because we're in the discussion part yet. Did the UW ever pay up?
What's that?
The last director indicated the UW system owed SEP a bunch of money. Did they ever pay?
Yeah. So we did, I think just last week, we got, like 40,000 in. They still owe some money, but I don't want to quote an incorrect number, but they have paid
Okay,
some.
good.
We're working. We're on them all the time for that, but they have paid some.
Then along with that question, I believe we sent a check for 5,000 to you guys.
Yes.
What is that repayment in the 2025 budget?
I believe that part of it is, but we had just worked through that line item. So that is in the budget. I'm hoping that that's part of the balance.
Any other discussion? Okay, thank you, Scott.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passed.
Maybe I should have him.
Moving on. Item number 9 on the agenda, Buck Tussle Cell Tower Expansion Update. Any new dates, Nick?
Yeah, the only reason I had the chair keep this one on here was the grant, not grant, bond, the bond. We're not doing grant money. We're doing bond money. The bond for the project that we are the backers of did go through last week, or October 31st it was bid out. It was accepted. With that, we received a fee or a $30,000. I don't remember what they called it. It was like your service cost, the cost for us to be participating. So we got a $30,000 payment. We did segregate those funds. And so eventually what we need to do is come up with a resolution or a process that we want to see happen with the funding that we'll receive for being the partner in this. So that $30,000 is sitting there. We get 40 basis points going forward on any outstanding debt. So for the first 3 years, it's going to be the principal, because they don't make payments on year 4 and 5. They make interest payments, so there's still principal. And then after that, they solely pay the principal. So that 40 basis points becomes less and less of a payment. What Carrie and I are going to recommend is that we make a segregated fund to receive those funds. And then as we get prepared to update our telecommunications, to put equipment on these towers and at the towers at the base of them, we use that funding to offset the cost. So we'll have a year and a half of collecting those funds, and then we can look at what the total cost is. As we go forward, we can either make payments on a loan for it using that funding, or pay ourselves back if we use capital money. But that's what we'll be suggesting for that funding that we receive for being the partner in this project. I haven't heard much back about what status and timelines, because they've been working on just the bonding portion. I think we saw there's a follow-up meeting coming up here in the next month for that.
So moving forward, you're going to put together a resolution?
Yeah, so it won't do anything till February, because that's the next board meeting, but at probably the February executive meeting, we'll have that all sorted out and know more about the project and what our costs are going to be and what's going to come in and what's going to need to go out. Yep, the goal was what they say 18 months is to have everything constructed. So we'll have to come up with probably in our 2026 funding, either take a loan and use this money to be paying it back, or capital improvement money, depending on where we're sitting.
Anything else regarding Buck Tussle? Okay. Hearing none, moving along, monthly vouchers. Motion by Hallstrand. Second by Polachek. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving vouchers signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Vouchers approved. Date of next meeting, and then we included in the packet the possibility of going to a standardized calendar for committee meetings. We already have a standardized county board meeting. So Nick, you want to talk about this just a little bit?
Yeah, so this came out of the board discussion and admin discussion, that part of the issue we're having is the randomness of the meetings, and it's difficult to schedule, right? So from that, I worked with Jules, and we came up with saying, here's kind of a standardized, we'll schedule all 12 months, every committee. You get the first Tuesday, you get the first Wednesday, you get the third Thursday, whatever it might be. Even though the committees have limits, right? Committees should only have 10 meetings unless it's requested by the board. It's easier to cancel meetings than it is to create meetings. So now if we can standardize and say, here you go, board members, for the next year, if you're on these committees, put them in your calendar. You may not be able to make it because you're on a family vacation or hunting or whatever it might be, but this is the standardized one. And then if there's not enough, we'll work with the clerk and the chairs and say, oh, this agenda is really light. Do you want to skip it? We'll send out an email, that one's skipped, rather than trying to alter them or change them or sit at the meeting and go, okay, I have this, what other meetings are going on? It's just a standard calendar. You skip them. It's easier to skip or cancel than it is to try to create one if we need one. It'll help our department heads. It'll help Carrie, myself. It'll help all of us to say, okay, what are we preparing for? What's the next one? Or if something does come up, I can tell a department, yep, the next executive meeting to even talk about that will be on this date, rather than trying to schedule one because it's an emergency. You know, it shouldn't be an emergency. It should just be a standard schedule. So we brought it forward as a suggestion going go to the board to standardize the calendar for next year.
Any comments, Mr. Polachek?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is getting back to the way it used to be when you could look ahead to your meetings and kind of schedule your life around it. So thank you to you and Carrie and Jules.
Well, Carrie didn't do it this time. Don't give her. No, I'm kidding. She
Oh, it's
helped.
just you this time?
It was just Jules and I. Well, and Jean helped. Jean, you stealing it? No, I'm kidding. We all worked together on it based on the comments we had. And I think you're right. This is how it used to be.
Yes.
It made it way easier than trying to track people down. Jean does an excellent job at getting a hold of you as chairs. Someday she lets us know how difficult that is.
Mr. Barkstrom, do you have something?
So what do you need from us?
I know.
What do you need from us? A resolution or a friendly nod?
Just we're recommending this. We'll take it to the full board to introduce it. If you guys at the full board say, yep, we want it, we'll get it on the calendar. Everybody will know going forward. I think the biggest hurdle is going to be is there are some chairs that, you know, I'll pick on Jeff. He has hunting during bear hunting. He does this or goes out west, whatever it might be. He's going to have to understand I'm missing this scheduled meeting, and the vice chair has to know that they're being ready. We've been really trying to be flexible, which really just creates chaos on our end and on the board members' end. It's okay to miss a meeting. You know, that's been lost in translation, I think. This will help. We know who's going to be online, who's not going to be online. You'll know quite a ways ahead. We didn't want to cancel meetings on there already. Like, we know December and July and January are usually big skip months, right? We'll still put them on the calendar. It'll just be the chair that goes, nothing, department head, nothing, clerk, nothing. Let's email everybody, canceled, done. So
I think it's a good idea for the general public to know when the meetings are going to be too ahead
that was
of
the
time.
other thing we brought up is if I'm a general public person and I said, I have a problem with plowing, highway. When's the next meeting? Oh, it's already scheduled. You can start to get used to it as a citizen. Every second Tuesday, I can go complain to the highway about their plowing. Roger's on, so that's why I'm saying this.
So I think this is great and just exactly the points that have been made, that it gives some stability that, if I want to come to Larry's highway meeting, I know what it is, and we can't steal each other's day, and be the first one to grab it and have to be 8 o'clock versus 9, things like that. And we still have the flexibility, because I know in forestry, these grant application stuff pop up just out of the blue that, oh, we got this. So
And-
we can still pop one in here if we need to.
And a part of those the problem is Joe, and not picking on Joe in a bad way, but we don't schedule the meeting. So Joe gets a grant application. He doesn't know when's it going to be. Now he knows I got the grant application. I know I have a meeting on the 20th of next month. I can be prepared for it rather than, when are we going to do this? Oh, can it be early? Can it be late? It'll take a lot of the chaos, and it's not bad chaos, but the running around and put us into a schedule. We all know when
I think it's
everybody.
great.
I
Do we
like
need
it
a
too.
motion?
You can if you want.
I would
think-
motion we forward this on for consideration at the full board.
I will second that.
Okay.
Motion by Hellstrand, second by Erickson to forward this on to the full board. Not necessary, but I think it's a good idea. So we
Yeah, you
all
support
know
Vote,
what we're,
vote of support. yeah.
Support.
Yes.
vote of support. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried.
So does that mean the next executive meeting is December 11th?
This is
Technically, this starts
2025.
2025, but we could say, yep.
But you
this-
do need a December meeting.
Yeah, so you
Correct.
could
Yeah,
just
I was
start
just
the-
going to bring that up. We still
But
need to
you could-
schedule that, or?
I'll be here. Yep. So December 2nd, I will be out. We're having our third child. We're scheduled for that date. So I'll be out that week, but then after that, I plan on half days
So-
or a little bit more. That's what they tell us. You'll be there.
Well, when it's scheduled, I mean, it's
No, that
done,
wouldn't
it's
be
over,
December.
right? You'll be back to work the
It-
next day.
It would be December 12th.
My brother's.
Would be
pretty-
that Thursday. Yeah. I was looking at,
I won't be able to make it.
see, we got a problem already.
Well, I scheduled my
Who's vice
doctor's
chair? They're
appointment
taking-
before I knew we were going to go to this schedule.
We can start in 2025.
So what date would you like for the December meeting?
Jeez, now I can't go to
I-
Kansas.
I
My
think
daughter's
the
having
main
a
thing was
baby.
approving that you need approval for that ARPA, whatever.
The resolution is really just for us.
We wouldn't need a December meeting.
So you don't need any of that finalized by December
we have to have-
31st
We have to have contract.
through a
Contracts.
committee. Okay.
So,
Maybe you
do
don't
wanna
need a
explain
December
this
then.
further?
So you'll,
So one of the items that is coming up for near time to be dealing with is we have to clean up all our ARPA funding. And we like it to be in a resolution so that we have it cleaned up. It's easy for the auditors. The problem is for the state and the feds, we have to have everything contracted or an agreement in place by the end of this year. So technically, if we're making some of these agreements, they wouldn't be resolutions. It can't be a resolution anyways, because we don't have a board meeting till February, so we wouldn't get it. But the nice thing about having a resolution is at least we know that there's a high probability of needing that contract in place or having that contract. So it's not necessarily, if you feel comfortable, me and Carrie working with Brian to make sure we're not out of line on some of these contracts that we're making, to make sure it's allocated legally. And we talked about, most of them are projects we've talked about. We're just making sure we actually get stuff in place.
so you refer to these as contracts, but some of it is like a contract with ourselves, correct?
Some of it would be like the boiler, like
Yeah,
we,
But
yeah,
I mean,
so
like the 650 for
we,
forestry.
that one I'm not worried about. It would be the,
Yeah, for forestry, it's already, we've already had the resolution, we already know, we're already in spending.
But
We
it's-
already have the
it's-
grants, we already have it.
It's
yes.
in-house. I mean, it's not really a contract with a provider.
right. So part of it's like the accounting side of it. So we're going to be recommending to get a agreement in place with Bay Area Rail Transit. So they haven't been able to get buses for the last couple of years, but we've agreed through Health and Human Services that we are going to participate in the share for the buses. So this is a great place to use that funding is we can get an agreement with Bay Area Rail Transit for 3 buses, 3 different agreements, knowing we've already agreed to them. We just didn't pay for them yet. So, but we don't have a resolution. We just have a motion from Health and Human Services that we were going to do it through our budget. So it's now in the general fund, but ARPA would be, we're
I think
replacing
some of
ARPA
it
in
came to
general.
that, I don't know all of it, all the money for the buses, but I think some of it went to full board.
Yeah, that's, so
The
that's the
electric
problem.
bus.
Yeah, the electric did,
Yeah.
but
It's
the
the only one that went
there's-
to the full board.
2 other ones that we've allocated money for through Health and Human Services. So then it goes into the general fund. We're saying use ARPA money so that that general fund can just stay there. So that's where I have no problem if you guys feel comfortable working with Brian to just outline what we're doing and then you guys get the resolutions to confirm them. We just need to get something that we
We
can.
need
put
something on
towards-
paper for the feds.
Yeah, so they
that
don't
We
ask
can
for the
still
money.
edit this going forward.
The way
We're not
we-
we're not
yeah.
signing anything.
So the way we would edit it is accounting, right? So one of the suggestions is pay for the boilers. Well, we've already paid for the boilers through capital improvement. What we're saying is reallocate that capital improvement, give it back to capital improvement by saying the boilers were paid for by ARPA. Now we've put money back where we took it from originally. And so if something else came up, we would just say use the capital improvement. It would be like an ARPA funding. So it's just a in and out and putting a label on it so that the Fed doesn't ask for the funding back.
Right.
We can draw a picture.
Okay, sounds like we can do this if we're all in agreement with Nick and myself and
The-
his staff talk about it.
Yeah.
We don't need a meeting in December then at this time. If we do, we'll let you know.
And then January we'll go to the new scheduling.
Correct.
So
So,
next meeting, January 9th.
yes.
Got it.
Awesome.
Anything else? Hearing none, I hereby adjourn this meeting.